My honor and pleasure to be here with Temple Grandin, a hero of mine, who I followed for many, many years, as I'm sure you have as well. So thank you for taking this time to talk.
It's great to be here, other than I've got a sore throat and a really bad cold.
As someone who has been at the forefront of the issues of the more humane treatment of animals, it's many of us really look up to you as someone who's
Well,
done.
I've worked with improving conditions in slaughter plants for over 40 years.
Yes.
When I first started, I thought I could fix everything with equipment, but the other half of the equation is management. Management's got to care.
Yeah.
And I developed a simple scoring system that can be used to evaluate animal handling and welfare at a regular slaughter plant, and then also at a kosher slaughter plant. You measure things like electric prod use, animals falling down, and vocalization is a really good measure. If you've got something really bad going on when you restrain the animal, you'll fail the vocalization. You're doing things right, no more than 5% of the cattle may vocalize. You're doing things wrong, like squeezing them too hard, you might have 30% of them vocalizing.
Wow.
And then you can also, in kosher, do collapse times, and in regular slaughter, do the percentage stunned correctly on the first attempt. So in the first half of my career, I pretty much just worked on equipment. The second half of my career, more on the management.
Yeah. So where did this interest come from for you?
Well, it gets back to getting exposed. Students get interested in things they get exposed to. I was exposed to beef cattle when I was a teenager. I came from a non-ag background. And you look into how a lot of students get interested in a career, it's exposure. And then they learn, do I like this or do I hate it?
Yeah. And what resonated with you? What happened in seeing animal suffering?
Well, I just wanted to fix it. I worked in the 80s on tearing out some really bad shackle hoist operations, really bad ones. Like Spencer Foods, this would be back in 1980.
Right.
Vocalization score was probably 100%. And I worked on tearing that system out and replacing it with a better system.
Yeah.
And I wrote about it in one of my early papers.
Right. So what would you say was your biggest success in this field?
Well, getting rid of a lot of shackling and hoisting.
Yeah.
You know, most of the big places have stopped doing that.
If you don't know what that is, shackling and hoisting is where the animal is held upside down.
Taking an animal by a live animal and put a chain around its ankle and just hang it up in the air.
And then slaughter, and then dropping it down, essentially, right?
And the cattle just be screaming.
And you've seen that happen.
Oh, yeah. When I worked on Spencer Foods back in 1980, you could hear the bell running in the parking lot, the cafeteria. And we tore that system out.
Was it hard for you to watch those kind of things?
Man, I just did everything I could to get rid of these things. I remember another plant, Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah.
This was early 90s. It was horrible. Well, I went right down to the engineer's office. I got a bid on new equipment.
Yeah.
And I went up to the manager's office, and he said, how do you like our kosher operation? I said, you can't sign a purchase order fast enough. And I shoved it in his face, and he signed it.
So what do you think about stunning?
Stunning done right works fine.
What type of stunning?
Captive bolt stunning. The problem with slaughter without stunning, if you get sloppy, it goes bad really quickly. It requires much more attention to details of procedure than regular slaughter with stunning. You get the least bit sloppy, you can have bad stuff happening, like live cattle walking around.
Okay. Wow. And what about stunning after the slaughter? Would that help as well?
Well, that definitely would help, yeah.
Okay. And because how long would you say an animal is alive after a slaughter process, typically?
Well, the heart beats for a while.
Yeah.
If you stun an animal with a captive bolt, the heart may beat for 2 or 3 minutes
Right.
if you don't bleed it right away.
Right.
That's something a lot of people don't realize.
Right. So they maybe feel pain for quite a while still. Now, I'm curious about your experiences in the kosher slaughterhouses. What sort of things were you involved with there?
Well, in the mid-'80s, I was involved with the Utica veal plant, Frank Barkley, tearing out a shackle hoist system for kosher slaughter and putting in a double rail center track restrainer system. That was mid-'80s. And then prior to that, I worked at the Spencer Foods in 1980s to get rid of their shackling and hoisting. And then with the old John Morrell plants in Sioux Falls and Montgomery, Alabama, that was in the early 90s.
Okay, and what have you seen change in the kosher slaughterhouses, from
Well,
decades
most of
ago
the
until
people
now?
have gotten rid of the shackling and hoisting. Some of them have gone to the rotating boxes, much more expensive. But again, I want to hold you to the scoring system. Keep your vocalization score under 5% of the cattle.
Right.
And what I've seen, and I have a good colleague of mine is going to many of these plants, it gets back to management.
Right.
And some managers care, and some managers don't care.
Right. So, and over the decades, is your experience that the management of kosher slaughterhouses have cared more or less?
There's some that's good and there's some that's terrible.
Okay.
What I have found brought the biggest change is in 1999, I was hired by McDonald's Corporation to implement the scoring system in their suppliers. And they kicked a couple of people off the approved supplier list.
Yeah.
And when you have a customer that big insisting things get done right, things change. I think in the future around the world, the biggest amount of change is going to get brought about by customers that buy meat insisting on it.
Do you see us in general going in the right direction or not?
Yeah, things are gradually going in the right direction. But we've got to have simple things. There's a tendency for stuff to get way too complicated. I think it's difficult for some people to realize you can take a simple score, like it bellowed in the restraint box, yes or no. And if you're doing things right, that'll be low, like 5%. You start doing things wrong, electric prods, sharp edges, squeeze them too hard, your vocalization score can go to 20%, 30%.
Now, is the reason you're concerned with vocalizations?
It's an easy way to measure the animal's distress.
Right.
And you've got to have simple, easy things that people can do.
Right.
And I have a paper in Applied Animal Behavior Science where 99% of the vocalizations were directly associated with something nasty, like electric prods, doors slammed on them, or getting squeezed too hard, or sharp edges.
So if you look at beef and you look at dairy and you look at poultry and all the various dimensions of the industries, where do we see the most suffering? Where do we see the least? Where's the most?
All right, well, we have to separate slaughter issues
Yes.
from housing issues.
Right.
And the species, of course, you don't eat pork.
Right.
But the species that have the biggest issues are the laying hen and the sows and gestation critters. Now, a lot of people now are moving away from those little small cages. Mm-hmm. And there's some new loose housing systems for chickens that are working well.
Yeah.
But the thing that drives change is customers insisting on it.
Right.
But we have to make sure we get the producers doing the right things and not doing something stupid that's not going to work.
Right. So I'm curious how you answer both those to the right of you and to the left of you. Those to the right of you who say, we shouldn't care at all, humans are what matter, animal suffering doesn't matter, what matters is low costs. Right? What's your response to that?
I was at a big hen operation. This was a good, 20 years ago or so. I was working for a major buyer of eggs. And I said, well, these hens look like they got put through a clothes wringer. I said, if I brought 10 people out here from the Chicago airport, I don't think they'd like this very much. Yeah. And, there's a point where you're doing stuff that's just wrong. And I grabbed the embroidery that's on my shirt and I said, what if you had child slaves sew these cattle pictures on this shirt? Yeah. I think everybody would agree that that's wrong.
Right.
There's a point where you're cramming them in something so tight, they can't even sleep at night without being on top of each other.
Right. Okay, and what's your response to those on the left, so to speak, who say there shouldn't be any slaughter in the first place?
Well, there is slaughter going on right now.
Right.
So what I'm doing is working to make it better.
That's right.
I have thought about maybe someday in the future,
Yeah.
There'll be no more, slaughtering.
Right.
And I can remember when insulin switched from being collected from pancreas glands of cattle to grown in a vat, with recombinant DNA, the first GMO. Well, someday we'll have the power to make any kind of life we want. And when the slaughterhouses become obsolete, then we're really going to have the ethics issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can make any animal you want.
Right. All these lab burgers and the like, yeah. So, so what I hear commonly is people say, yes, I'm a customer, I care, but I feel nobody can hear me. I scream, so how does a customer...
In 1999, when I was hired by McDonald's and Wendy's, you got that kind of buying power behind you, you can really bring about change.
Yeah.
Bring about change in a really big way.
Right.
That's what makes change.
Yeah. Right. So how can folks do that? Where should they be calling? Where should they be advocating?
Well, I think most of it's going to be working with big buyers.
Right.
But on the other hand, let's take something like slow-growing broilers.
Right.
Well, if I go with really slow-growing broilers, I take 25% more feed to feed the chickens.
Yeah.
So if I got 4 truckloads of feed, now I've got to add a 5th truckload of feed.
Right.
That's a lot of feed.
Right.
Now, the broiler industry's actually done some things to improve the problems with the fast-growing broilers, like breeding bigger legs on them.
Yeah.
But taking a 25% hit on the amount of feed you have to buy, that's not very good from a sustainability standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Now you're of course most well known for two areas, although you're involved with so many things. This more humane treatment of animals, and the autism awareness and advocacy. And I wonder, is there any connection between those two for you?
Well, I'm an extreme visual thinker. Everything I think about is in a picture.
Yeah.
And an animal's world is sensory based.
Right.
It's not word based. So being a visual thinker helped me in some of my initial work with livestock, because I noticed little distractions that people tend to not notice. Like right now, there's a reflection on this table, and the cattle might not want to walk over the shadow, or maybe there's a chain hanging down, or a coat on a fence, and most people just did not notice that.
So it's really been a gift for you to be able to experience this in a way that many people can't.
Well, and I talk about this in my book, Animals in Translation. And when I first started my work, I thought everybody was a visual thinker. I didn't know that my thinking was different.
Right. Until when?
Well, until I wrote Thinking in Pictures in the mid-90s, and I started interviewing people about how they think. And I was shocked to find out, if you said factory, to some people they got sort of a vague image of the roof going like this.
Yeah.
Where I see specific ones.
Right. Right. So do you experience it more intensely, do you think? Do you experience when you see?
I don't experience it verbally.
Okay.
I see pictures in my mind
Right.
of specific factories,
Right. Right.
not a generalized factory with a roof like this.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to kosher slaughterhouses for a moment. What are some of the best practices that we still see in kosher slaughterhouses today that we should be advocating for?
You have
and
to
what's some of the worst?
You have to separate your variables out. Restraint method
Right. Yes.
from slaughter without stunning.
Yes, of course.
And some of the worst stuff has been with the restraint method.
Yeah.
And if you're using a rotating box, it's got to be a really good rotating box, or you're going to fail on all your scores.
Yeah.
The other thing is good technique in cutting. You do good technique in cutting, 90% of your animals will collapse in 30 seconds and go unconscious. Sloppy method of cutting, you can get prolonged periods of consciousness.
Right. Is there anything that's better in the kosher industry than in general?
Well, stunning with a captive bolt that's done correctly is absolutely instantaneous.
Yeah.
You see, kosher slaughter, no matter how well it's done, is not instantaneous.
Right. Right.
So basically, I'm going to say that kosher slaughter can be acceptable from an animal welfare standpoint, but it requires much more intensive attention to details of procedure
Right.
than
So there's
regular
nothing
slaughter.
that's naturally a higher standard of kosher slaughter then?
Well, the thing is, it's not instantaneous.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing is, you get the least bit sloppy, it goes bad really fast.
Right. Right. Okay.
And this is where people get into trouble. They start pushing the system, trying to go too fast.
Too fast. Yeah.
Then you end up on skinning or taking the foot off an animal that hasn't bled out enough
Right.
to lose consciousness.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that kind of stuff's not happening.
Yeah. Now, was Postville normal, or was that an anomaly?
Postville was horrible. I remember that awful video where the trachea was hanging out of it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
That particular plant now, I think, is one of the ones that's probably one of the better ones now. But it's under totally different management.
Okay, but and you've been inside the new one, or?
I haven't been inside it since I fixed it, but people I know really well
Oh,
have
I
been
see.
in there.
I see. Okay.
But that was crazy, yanking out those tracheas.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And what are some things that are happening? So I know we're importing some shackle and hoist. The kosher community is importing because you can't really do it in America. You can't do it in America. But thank you. I mean, so now they're importing. So there's something to stand up there. But what's happening in America?
Well, one of the things
slaughterhouses still?
happening with they're importing meat probably from Uruguay.
Yeah.
And lots of times they resist putting in restraint equipment because it's slower than
Right.
just shackling them and dragging them around.
It's all about speed for them, right?
Yeah.
Right. Right. So what's happening in America kosher slaughterhouses that we should be
Well,
advocating
most of
against?
the big ones have put in decent restraint equipment, but some of it's operated really badly. Some of it's designed really badly. The first thing is it's got to pass the audit.
Right.
5% vocalization score, 1% falling. This is the whole facility.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want an excellent score on prod use, 5% on prod use, and 90% of the cattle collapse or have eye roll back within 30 seconds.
Right.
That's
But
the first
they
thing
don't
need
have
do.
to have this type of supervision, right? A lot of them probably avoid doing this
Well,
scoring
the
at all,
people
right?
that are doing the scoring are companies like McDonald's or supermarkets.
Yes, right.
If the buyers don't do the scoring, there's certain plants that are going to get very sloppy.
Right. So kosher
You see, because
slaughterhouses.
the problem is it's all exempt from USDA.
Right.
They have what they call the bubble, the area of intimate restraint. USDA can't go in there. they can, if the cattle fall down the loading ramp, yep, they could tag them up for that.
Right.
But they basically inside the bubble, the USDA can't go in there.
Right.
And so some people think there's a license to do whatever they want.
Right, right. Wow, so why have they blocked transparency? Why have they been allowed to not be transparent?
Customers haven't demanded it. It's going to get back to customers demanding it.
Right, right.
That's what made the big plants turn around. Now, I'm not going to say they're perfect, they're not perfect, but compared to the 80s and the early 90s,
Right.
the great big regular plants are 100% improved compared to 80s and 90s.
Right. But so are the kosher plants doing the scoring process right now?
There's some that do a good job and there's some that do a lousy job. And it's going to get back. The people that buy meat there, making them change it.
Yeah. And who are the
And there'll need to be some plant managers you need to get rid of. Other thing I learned, we did the McDonald's audits. Out of 75 suppliers I had, 3 plant managers had to go down the road.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, it gets back to management.
So who are the types of people who are going in to do the scoring? Is it something you're still
It's
doing?
mainly food safety auditors.
Okay.
There are third-party auditing companies that go in and monitor the food safety. We'll do the animal welfare scoring.
Right.
Also, people need to put in video auditing.
Right.
There's a company called Aerosite and some other companies where they can tune into the video cameras and do the scoring.
Right, right, right.
It's oversight by a third-party entity. But there's a lot of stuff that won't change until the buyers make it change.
Right, okay. So that seems to be your main message
Yep.
here, is the buyers need to demand this change.
They need to demand the change
Right.
because it's an exemption,
Right,
and the only thing that can make a change is the buyers.
right, right. It feels like one of the things we're put into this world to do is to reduce the suffering of others. It seems to me there's no population that suffers more than the animal population, just that mass. And what we're doing today in
there's
capitalism.
a lot, gets into, big is bad or, little is good.
Yeah.
What is bad is badly managed is bad. I've seen badly managed small and well managed small.
Right.
Well managed big, badly managed big.
Right.
It gets back to management, and do not understaff and overwork your people.
That's right.
Because if you overwork your people, they can't do a decent job.
Right, and so probably bad worker treatment is correlated with bad animal treatment, right?
Well, you can't overload the worker to where they can't do the job right.
Right. Well, thank you for this time. Is there any closing message you want to share on this?
The buyers are going to drive change in all kinds of different issues on food.
Right. And so we need to raise our voices to advocate whether someone eats a lot of meat, very little meat, no meat, or a lot of dairy, very little dairy. These types of things are things we need to advocate from. You have been at the forefront for decades at this. I'm grateful for you taking this time.
And we also have to find things that are practical.
Yeah.
Like for example, in the broiler chicken,
Yeah.
you might want to slow the growth down a little bit.
Yeah.
And they can do some other things to get rid of the lameness by growing a stronger leg on the bird.
Yeah.
But a 25% hit on feed conversion.
Right.
That's not very sustainable.
Why is there so much deception around things like cage-free and free range? A lot of places advertise that, but they don't really. It's not necessarily the case, right?
Cage-free means you don't have them in a cage. Now, what does free range mean? What it usually should mean is they're going outside.
Yeah.
We're cage-free, they're inside a building, but not in a cage.
Okay.
That's normally what that would be.
Or free range still means in a building.
Well, depends upon who's. This is where labels
yeah.
need to start getting clear.
Right. Right.
One time I got after an egg company. I was consulting with them. I'm not going to say who it was. And they showed a picture of a chicken out on pasture and a carton of eggs. I said, "Do your chickens go out in pasture?" They said, "No." Then get rid of those egg cartons.
Yeah. Right.
They're cage-free.
Right.
And they stay inside the building. Don't put a picture of a chicken on pasture on your carton.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you been involved with fish at all?
I haven't.
You haven't. Okay. Right. Well, okay. Well, this has been deeply informative. I'm very grateful for all you've done and for all you continue to inspire.
Well, you also might be interested in my book, Improving Animal Welfare: A Practical Approach.
Good. When did you write that?
It came out about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Improving Animal Welfare: A Practical Approach.
Okay.
You can pick it up on Amazon.
Okay. Wonderful. Is that your main book on this issue?
It's my main book on animal welfare issues, and it's aimed at people that are going to implement actual programs.
Oh, it is. So it's very technical.
Yeah, it's technical, but it's also practical.
It's practical also. Right.
How do we actually implement programs that are going to improve things?
Right, right. How do we get legislators to care? I mean, there's so much of their money is tied up with big ag that it feels like no matter how much...
I think the biggest change is going to be customers driving it. Because when I worked at McDonald's in 1999, I saw more improvement than I'd seen in a 25-year career prior to that.
Right.
The other thing that made it work is the scoring system was simple.
Right.
They knew exactly what they had to do to pass.
Right.
It was like traffic rules for slaughter plants.
Right, right,
Traffic rules work because they're simple.
right, right. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. You should be blessed with good health and lots of strength in your continued work.
Okay, well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.